Propaganda coming out of the Federal Reserve and all that other stuff. I got this idea for this video to keep kind of going on with the uncertainty and the pushing of uncertainty and how it is that they are using that to conduct monetary policy. But the neighbor just came over and says, hey man, I need a jump. So we're going to go do that. Just waiting for Freddie to... Are you going to walk over or you want to ride?
I'll just have it.
Okay. So... Alright, Freddie, careful of the computer there.
Okay.
Alright, so we got a few people watching here. Why don't you hold the camera while we drive over real quick.
Alright.
Alrighty guys, we're gonna go jump the neighbor's car real quick before we get the video going. So maybe as people start joining in, you can kind of let them know in the comment section what's going on right now. All-nighter's there, he'll take care of business. Thank you, brother. I forget which side. What side is the battery on? Do you remember, Fred?
Which side?
It's on this side?
Yes.
Okay.
I remember.
Oh boy, can I get in there? Yep.
Side mirrors.
I can't get out now.
Oh no.
Alright, that's okay, he's gonna move the barrel. Where's the hood? Alright, there it is.
Do you have any jumpers?
I don't know, let me look in the back. Hey Freddie, why don't you go and unlock the trunk real quick?
Find them for me.
You see, oh, we got all the stuff we were getting for the turkeys. Oops. If not, I guess I gotta walk over there. Thank you. Your jumper cables back here?
I can run over to you.
Yeah, does he have some? I mean, I could grab mine. I didn't think to grab them, though. Oh, well, I guess he's off to go get some jumper cables. Alrighty, guys. We're gonna jump Ernie's truck here real quick. Oh, that's all that stuff. Cool, his battery. What is it got? Oh, he's got a trickle charger going there. Here, Fred, why don't you hold this for a second? You kind of keep everything in frame.
I'll try.
Or maybe, no, it is on
Oh,
this
yeah.
side, but that's okay. I think we have enough room.
Alright.
Let's see, let's set this thing up right over here or something. Alrighty, guys, thanks for hanging out while we get Ernie's truck all jump started here. So he just ran over to go get some cables. We got 66 people watching with 16 likes. Thank you for joining in on today's live stream. We're just gonna be just a minute here. Get the truck started. Let's see. What do you think? What do you want to talk about, Fred?
I don't know.
Anything fun happening? Getting turkeys.
Yeah.
We're gonna be raising turkeys here. We got
we're getting 2 turkeys for the fair.
for the fair. We're gonna raise them for fair. He's doing 4-H.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna, once fair is started, we're gonna get the good one, the one that we want to sell, and the other one we'll keep.
We'll keep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe butcher it.
Raise it up to eat it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The turkeys that we did last year, they were pretty good. All right, here's Ernie. All right, so I got this set up here. Ernie, be careful of the camera.
Yeah. No problem there.
Let's go.
Now,
Hey, why don't you grab that just in case it falls, Fred? No, the
Phone.
Oh, the phone.
yeah. Yeah, no problem.
Get a PR hold behind the road grader.
Oh yeah.
Some kind of lawnmower.
Oh okay.
Use the driveway. Looking that way.
Oh, that's cool.
And when you do that over your driveway with your gravel, it loosens the gravel, lets the dirt fall down, so it doesn't pack up and start growing weeds real quick.
Yeah. Be nice. I'm gonna have to hay my field here pretty soon if I don't mow it. Oh, sorry, I don't want to bust all your shit to pieces.
Oh, the trunk is still open.
Oh, okay. Can you go close it?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we're almost done here, guys. We'll get started. Thanks for sticking it out. I hope you guys are enjoying this. Helping the neighbor out. All right, you want to hold that for? You see what number it is?
Oh no.
Skipping over to the other driveway. Alright. Super glad I can help. Ernie helps out so much. I mean, to be able to repay the favor as simple as giving a jump, I mean, I'm super happy to do it for him because he's done a lot for me as a neighbor. He's a really cool guy. And it's good to have good neighbors like that. The neighbor, he's on one side, and then I have a lady on the other side who's like, she's super sweet lady, but she's like 90 years old, and I worry for her all the time, so I constantly look over there, make sure the lights are on or going on and off and stuff like that. But you know, she's all independent, and she's really cool. She even goes out and gets firewood and loads up the firewood herself and stuff, so that's probably why she's still 90, you know, or still kicking it at 90. All right. Thanks for helping out, Fred.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, you want me to hold that while you get out? All right. All right, good morning, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Yeah, Ernie popped over. He was just like, oh man, you're about ready to start. I'm like, yeah, in like 2 minutes. And he was like, I need a jump. And I'm like, let's do it, bud. You need a jump? Let's get it done. So in today's video, we're going to talk about some more about the uncertainty. And I know like beating a dead horse isn't exactly fun for a lot of people out there when it comes to monetary policy and trying to discuss what it is that's taking place out there. But to understand that the Federal Reserve uses their words more than their actions to conduct monetary policy, and to understand how it is that they are doing this is incredibly important to make decisions for what it is that you have going on with whether you're going to buy a house or a car or doing business in general. Understanding this information and internalizing it for yourself is absolutely critical because there's nobody else who's going to explain this to you. And really, it took me years and years and years of studying monetary policy in order to find and be able to deliver this message. And to be honest with you, I don't even really feel that I'm that good at it. I think there's people out there who, if they were to really internalize this, to take this information, they could really deliver it in a way that could be profoundly impactful to the economy and to the individual if they were to do it in a massive scale. I'm doing the best I can. I hope everybody is enjoying the information, even though I know it's like repetitive, all right? But I thought this was incredibly important. This is something that was coming from the speech given by Jefferson. This is the speech we were going over May 13th of 2024, communicating about monetary policy. And now something I found very interesting within this speech is something that Loretta Mester Like Loretta Mester is very impactful, or I'm sorry, very influential when it comes to the Federal Reserve, and especially at the time. I think, I think she's starting to move on since the writings of this. But Loretta, a member of the FOMC subcommittee in communications, developed and advocated for several proposals to improve communications. Now, this is really interesting what this says next. One proposal was to publish a measure of uncertainty surrounding the SEP forecast numbers. The SEP is the Statement on Economic Projections, also known as the dot plot, right? One proposal was to publish a measure of uncertainty surrounding the SEP forecast numbers. And it's weird that they look at the uncertainty, not the certainty of it, the uncertainty. Okay? She says she was concerned that the uncertainty could be underestimated by the public if it wasn't communicated. You hear the problem with it? That the uncertainty could be underestimated. Meaning that the public wasn't like, they weren't concerned about it. They were very certain, right? They underestimated the uncertainty. So this is right here what I feel is very much in line with what it is that I was communicating out on the previous videos, talking about how it is that the Federal Reserve is creating a situation in which that the uncertainty is part of the monetary policy. By using a situation in which that people were very certain of the outcome that didn't come to fruition, creates an environment in which that they become very uncertain. And then if they push the uncertainty, then they have an open-ended monetary policy that then can be used through the mainstream media, propagandized information to then guide the markets into a particular direction. And there's proof of this when you think about this. Again, this is coming from another Jefferson speech. This was given February 21st of 2025. And what he says in here is that using textual analysis, frequency, asset price data, and frequency central bank communication data, this research shows that investors' reaction to specific sentences communicated by the central bank are quickly incorporated into asset prices. You get that? The markets themselves are listening to the Fed give specific sentences that end up moving into asset prices. The Federal Reserve knows how to communicate in this way to create that situation. Policymakers know that their communications are likely to affect the course of short-term rates, other asset prices, and the associated economic outlook, resulting in an easing or tightening of financial conditions. They know how to deliver the message. Delivering the message is how it is that they increase or decrease the expectations of inflation, tightening or easing of financial conditions by the delivery of the message. It is so important to understand this. I mean, to know this is written down in their own words, a member of the FOMC giving a speech saying that their specific sentences are being listened to by the market and are quickly incorporated into asset prices. They know what they are doing. Okay. In a recent paper, let me see if I can find this one here real quick. Sorry guys, all these files are just everywhere. This is monetary policy communications and their effects on household inflation expectations. This is a very, very interesting paper. This came out a few years ago. It looks like dates on it published of June of 2022. So it's a few years old, but it's incredible. It's a very incredible piece of piece of literature here coming from the Federal Reserve. And I'm going to read through some of the introduction of it, because once you start realizing how it is that they are using their communications and how well that they have studied the ability to direct their communications, because they know if they just go out there and state it, there's going to be people out there within the economy, within this social structure of society, that they're not going to hear the information no matter how loud they scream it. So they knew that they would have to inject the information. And this is incredible because they talk about how they do it. You know? Says here, central bank communications have greatly changed. And we got to think here, guys. If you're familiar with the credible threat theory, this is going to make a lot of sense. But the major problem that they were facing a few years ago was the expectation of inflation that was persistently too low rather than too high. They were looking for a way that they could communicate to the public to create an inflationary scenario that would be well elevated, to get their monetary policy into a position in which that their adjustment of interest rates would actually be an effective tool. We have talked about this a lot on this channel. If that is confusing to you, I'm sorry, I'm not going to break that part down right now because I'm going to break this speech down. But to understand at the time of this writing, it's not a speech, this working paper here. At the time of this writing, though, not deflation, lack of inflation, or the lack of an elevated inflation expectation, was the Fed's problem, right? And they were dealing with it. I mean, COVID has taken place, all kinds of stuff was happening right here, but they were still suffering through an issue of trying to figure out how they were going to deal with the monetary policy at the lower bound to zero, interest rates at zero, trying to communicate in a way that would then create the economic outcomes that they were looking for. Remember, I mean, he just said that they use specific sentences for asset prices, right? That would quickly be absorbed into asset prices. Okay, so we're going to break this thing down. And then again, and this is just the introductory to the monetary policy communications and their effects on household inflation expectations. And this is coming out of the Federal Reserve, University of Texas at Austin, and National Bureau of Economic Research. Anyway. Goes on to talk about this. It says, central bank communications have greatly changed in the last 30 years, as illustrated by the statements above from the different chairmen of the Federal Reserve. Central banks now announce their policy decisions, explain their reasoning, and describe their plans for the future. Notice they say they now do it. They didn't do that before. The Federal Reserve was never a group, had an idea of communicating anything. In fact, they were very quiet about it. I mean, anyway, hold on. Just because I think it's relevant, let me just bring it up here real quick. It says here, in 1980, this is a different, this is coming from Philip's speech, but it says this. In 1981, Karl Brunner, a Swiss monetary economist, called the central banking an esoteric art and lamented central banks' inherent impossibility to articulate its insight in an explicit and intelligible words and sentences. At the time, central bank wisdom dictated that monetary policy makers should say as little as possible. Some research of that vintage tried to rationalize this, quote, secrecy through the notion that monetary policy would be particularly effective if it surprised the markets. Very interesting to think about. They wanted to be secret. They could surprise the markets. Now, what do we have? Oops. We got the idea that central banks now announce their policy decisions, explain their reasoning, and describe their plans for the future. It's a whole different way of monetary policy. Yeah? These new communication strategies have been targeted targeted primarily at financial markets, both to minimize financial volatility and to shape long-term interest rates to better achieve central bank objectives. In this respect, they seem to have been successful, as illustrated, for example, by the effects of the forward guidance announcements and the long-term interest rates on long-term interest rates. So you notice that they are very aware that their communication and the forward guidance at the lower bound has a very impactful, is very impactful to the monetary policy. In terms of influencing the expectations of households or firms, central banks have had the much more targeted goal of anchoring their inflation expectations. Yet, despite this modest objective, central banks appear to have systematically failed in achieving it across most advanced economies. So this is what I've been saying. Over the previous 10 years, since the great financial crisis, quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, the printing of money, $850 billion balance sheet to $4.5 trillion, failed to produce the inflationary scenario that the Federal Reserve was looking for, and they just said it right there. Right? In terms of influencing the expectations of households or firms, central banks have had the much more targeted goal of anchoring their inflation expectations, yet despite the modest objective, right? All they had to do was just anchor it at 2%. How hard is that? Right? Yet despite this modest objective, central banks appear to have systematically failed in achieving it across most advanced economies. They couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. And this is the major problem. They were like everybody is so focused in on like the Federal Reserve not being able to get inflation down to the 2% target. They couldn't get 2%. That was their problem. They talk of this is in 2022, this paper came out. Firms and households in a low inflation countries report beliefs about inflation that are far from anchored, seem unaware of even dramatic monetary policy announcements, right? What do they say? Firms and households in low inflation countries report beliefs about inflation that are far from anchored. They wanted at 2%. People didn't even believe it was 2%. I mean, it's not like, Trump was helping back then. There's no inflation. The Fed should be printing money, right? Remember when he was saying that? This is what everybody was believing. There was no inflation, low inflation, 2% inflation didn't matter. Nobody gave a care. They didn't care, right? There was no interest in it whatsoever. Firms and households in low inflation countries reported beliefs about inflation that are far from anchored. That's right. They couldn't even get it to the 2%. Seem unaware of even dramatic monetary policy announcements. They would do these major changes to their policy and nobody knew what the hell was going on because nobody pays attention to the Fed. Okay. And more generally display almost no knowledge of what central banks do. That's right. Most people have no clue about the Federal Reserve or monetary policy or anything that's going on, and there is no way that they would understand anything about what was happening. They even said it. They just have, what was it? Firms and households in countries report beliefs about inflation that are far from anchored, seem unaware of even dramatic monetary policy announcements. Right? They have almost no knowledge of what central banks do. This ignorance, literally, this is what it says. This ignorance may be a sign of central bank success. No way. Really? This ignorance may be a sign of central bank success, since firms and households have little incentive to worry about inflation or monetary policy in a stable, low inflation environment. If it's not impacting their lives, they do not care. It doesn't make any difference to them. You could talk about it all day long. They could really care less. Right? Until it impacts their life. Right? Low inflation, you could talk about it all day. You could talk about it and say warnings and talk about monetary policy and do dramatic impacts with monetary policy, and the people will not pay attention. This ignorance may be a sign of central bank success, since firms and households have little incentive to worry about inflation or monetary policy in a low and stable inflation environment, but it is unlikely to be innocuous. Some of the non-traditional policies at the zero lower bound otherwise known as ZLB, right? The zero lower bound when Fed funds rates hit zero, right? Some of this non-traditional policies at the zero lower bound are thought to operate primarily through the inflation expectations. You hit the lower bound and now you have to use inflation expectations. But what you were just saying here is that the people that you're trying to influence with their inflation expectations aren't paying attention. Major problem for the Federal Reserve. This is why they fail. They can't do it because people weren't paying attention. They were like, crap, now what? All right. All right, but it is unlikely, okay, well, we read that part. Some non-traditional policies, zero lower bound, are thought to operate primarily through inflation expectations of households and firms. If their expectations are unresponsive to the central bank announcements and communications, as they seem to be, right, then this class of policy cannot be effective. They knew this. They knew this back in 2022, that if they went out there and just threw this communication, that the people would not pay attention. They would not know. You could talk about it all day long. They would not know. All right? So it says, again, if their expectations are unresponsive to central bank announcements and communications as they seem to be, then this class of policy cannot be effective. They would not be able to use this monetary policy tool of their words. They knew it. The fact that pre-treatment inflation expectations are dispersed and substantially differ from the Federal Reserve's inflation target of 2% also implies that the current focus of central bank communications on financial markets participants and professional forecaster limits its power to affect the real decisions of households and firms and ultimately the overall economy. I know that was a lot to say. But inside of that, they are essentially, if they communicate, there's only going to be a handful of people, and the households and businesses are not going to hear it the same way. Okay? Hence, understanding how central banks can communicate their policy to shape the expectations and decisions of households is especially important in times when actual inflation is low and nominal interest rates are stuck at zero. Now, this is important to understand because knowing that they ran out of monetary policy when they hit the lower bound of zero. Here they are in COVID. They took interest rates to zero. Once you have hit zero, your monetary policy is no longer an effective tool by using interest rate adjustments. You must use your words. However, households and businesses are listening to this differently. Right? Households just don't pay attention at all. They're completely ignorant. The ignorance may be a sign of central bank success, is how they've talked about it. However, if they cannot communicate it to them, then it's not successful. Hence, understanding how central banks can communicate their policy to shape the expectations and decisions of households is especially important in times when actual inflation is low and nominal interest rates are stuck at zero. Several central banks have realized the limited power of conventional communication tools and have already started to explore more unconventional channels such as music videos on inflation targeting. This was done by the Bank of Jamaica. Now, I know that sounds kind of funny to hear about, but to know that it has taken place and that it is being communicated right here. Not only is it music videos in Jamaica, or that is being used for an example from the Central Bank of Jamaica, or it's also the extensive use of Twitter to discuss and explain monetary policy decisions as exemplified by Olli Rehn, of the governor of the Bank of Finland. See how they're using social media? Because they knew that if they went and talked about it, nobody was going to listen. They had to go out there and directly inject the information into the people. They had to use it as a treatment. They had to use it as a treatment on the people. They needed to be treated with inflation expectation through music videos and Twitter posts. All right. Understanding how central banks can better communicate with the general public to shape their expectation is therefore of first order importance for the implementation of policy at the zero lower bound. And again, I know people will listen to this and they're like, dude, we're not even close to the zero lower bound anymore. What did Loretta Mester say? That they could use these tools even when the zero lower bound is not the problem. And this is how they're doing it. They create the uncertainty within the markets. That way they can have an open-ended monetary policy that they can communicate about, knowing that specific sentences can adjust the asset prices. It's all here. Right? This is all through their own words, through their own statements. We combine a new large-scale survey of households with a range of randomized information treatments to study how different types of communication affects the inflation expectation of consumers and ultimately their spending decisions. Right? So they literally talk about the way that they communicate. They can talk about it in several different levels to reach several different, groups of society. Because they know if they just put it out there, put the information out there, it's not going to get received by everybody. That's why they have music videos and Twitter posts. All right. While randomized controlled trials have recently begun to be applied in macroeconomics, our approach is unique in the magnitude of the survey. Approximately 20,000 consumers respond to our survey, more than 10 times the size of the New York Federal Reserve Bank survey of consumer expectations, or the size of other household surveys used for the RCT, the randomized control trials. This unprecedented scale allows us to simultaneously consider a wide range of different information treatments, 8 different treatments in a control group. Right? This is a pretty good study. It's about 50 pages long, so I mean, if you're into it, Okay, and explore how different characteristics of respondents might affect their response to the treatment. I love how they use this treatment. Like in the study, they treated them with information, right? Like, let's hit them with this treatment and see how they react to it. Okay, affect their response to the treatment, both immediate and in subsequent months in which we deploy follow-up surveys. The scale of our analysis is crucial for studying targeted communications, since the size of the conventional surveys does not yield enough statistical power to detect potential differentiated responses for various population groups or treatments. In addition, we implement follow-up surveys in 3 and 6 months later, through which we can also measure the persistence of the information effects much more systematically than previous work relying on rapid follow-ups. Finally, through a combination of survey questions and spending data from Nielsen, we are able to evaluate how exogenous changes in inflation expectations affect the spending decisions of households. Now, it continues on, but I'm not going to continue on talking about it. But what I thought was very interesting is that if you go and you read through this paper, when they treat the recipients of the information with an inflationary hit, like, because they'll talk about how it is that they deliver this information to the people. Once somebody gets that information, the effects of it after 3 months have dissipated almost like entirely. There's still a little bit there. After 6 months, it is gone, right? So it has to be constantly reiterated over and over and over again, because really the one-time treatment of some information is almost gone after 3 months. Right? Within 6 months, it's nowhere to be found. So I thought that was pretty interesting. It's a really good paper, and we might actually break this down in a few different segments for our member-only videos, because you can see, I mean, we're already like, about 15 minutes into this, 20 minutes into this, and it was just the introduction of this thing that we were talking about. But again, how it is that they use their words to communicate, how it is that they put this inflation expectation into the communication, whether or not they want that elevated or not. They talk about it in their own words on how it is that they deliver this information, knowing that not everybody is going to receive it the same way. I mean, you think about it, when it comes to understanding monetary policy, it is not about the interest rate adjustments. Think about it. Interest rate adjustments take 6 months to a year before they really impact the economy, right? Maybe even longer in some cases. But the communication has an instantaneous response, and they know that specific sentences are quickly absorbed into asset prices. This isn't, once you know it, you look for it. Then you can go and look for it happening within the economy. You go and see it happening within the news articles you read. You listen to it taking place with the other economists who are talking out there who do not see this information. I don't know why. They can go and find it themselves. It's out there. All you have to do is just Google it. But for whatever reason, they are not listening or following what it is that the Federal Reserve is communicating for their true monetary policy. This is the real thing. All right, let's just go through some comments here. Wow, look at all these comments. Okay. 176 people watching with 83 likes. Go hit that like button. All right. Everyone is a keyboard jockey. Yeah, they are. All right. Charlton, what did you mean by your comment about pain on Tuesday? Most people can't even open a pickle jar. Jeff Brewer, I was putting in hardwood flooring last week. I always sweat like a pig when I do that. It's why everyone plays pickleball. Hey Simon, I remember vividly when Powell was asked about cutting interest rates to boost the economy. All he said was, if the data continues as is, you said it best, data changes all the time. Yeah, absolutely. See, that's how come, once you follow, most people aren't obsessed with the Federal Reserve and monetary policy and hanging on every word they say like I have, right? Especially for as long as I have done this. So most people will listen for a few minutes, 15 minutes, maybe if they're lucky, give it a little bit of information. Maybe they might put on the Uneducated Economist while they're, doing some other work out there. But diving deep into this stuff so that you have you wouldn't believe how many documents that I have here that I highlight different, portions of, so that I could go back and recall this stuff to share with you guys. It's incredible. I don't even know how many. 30, 40, right? And these are just the ones that I save that I think are the most important ones. And, to be able to, recall, to say, wait a minute, remember when? Like Brody did it the other day with Jefferson's speech, talking about how they use uncertainty to create better monetary policy. And they describe exactly how they do that, right? By, having many different people, many different Fed officials come out at the exact same time to deliver information. And if they disagree with each other, that elevates the misinterpretation, in which ultimately guides them into uncertainty. And by having that uncertainty within the market, it's open-ended. Now the Federal Reserve can communicate going into the future, maybe even make it clear, use the propagandized information coming through the mainstream media to cause a more certain communication, which would then guide the markets whatever direction they want to go. Think about it. At the end of 2023, I love this. Because at the end of 2023, people kept saying, oh, the dot plot. Think about the dot plot. The dot plot is predicting 7 interest rate cuts or something like that. And I'm like, that isn't a promise, right? What that is saying that if economic conditions continue the way they are, that's what would be needed. The economic conditions will not be that. Whatever it is, it will have changed. It's guaranteed. There's never going to be anything the same. So by even simply saying we are data dependent is saying, hey, I ain't going to tell you shit. I ain't going to tell you. Because we're going to be data dependent, knowing that the data will definitely change by the time we get there. So if you want to know what I would do today, if this situation continues, then we would do this, right? But the situation will not continue. See, that's how people say, well, can you give a prediction or something? I was like, well, if this situation continued, then this would happen, but the situation isn't going to continue, so the prediction doesn't mean anything, right? Just like I didn't care about the dot plot. I'm like, that's not a prediction of the future. That's not a promise of interest rate cuts. That is telling you what they feel would be the case if this situation, what we are experiencing right now, was to continue to go into the future. Knowing that it won't be that way, no, you can then know that they will not be doing whatever it is that that dot plot is predicting. It's just a guarantee that they won't. So there's no point in saying the dot plot says this, maybe we should position ourselves for that. No, don't do that. Bad idea, right? A terrible idea. At the gym, watching people play pickleball and on elliptical, so cute. All right, crypto will not reach new highs. Zimmerman, you're getting a good start at the fool thing too. Congrats. Huh. All right, Wayne, you definitely win the sweating at work contest. All right. Do you think tariff is just a setup inflation expectations, and when there is a recession, they can print more than last time? Okay. Let's take this into consideration for just a second, because I've said this many times. I said, look at the credible threat of tariffs that has not happened yet. Nothing has happened. Now, I've said that before, right? That nothing has happened yet. However, people's expectations have definitely changed, and they are reacting and changing the economy based on the credible threat of tariffs. Now, what's funny is that I will find people in the comment section after I have said that go, dude, you're so wrong about tariffs. So many people are changing the way that they are behaving and all this other stuff. And I'm like, do you not see the credible threat? Right? Like, the tariffs are not implemented in a way that should have changed anything about the economy, except people are believing in understanding and knowing deep down inside that if they don't do something, they are going to get in trouble in some way, right? Because of the communication that has been pushed out there. Like, if they didn't have a radio and TV or cell phone or nothing else, like a radio, like anybody listens to the radio, if they didn't have a TV or cell phone or internet or anything else like that, and they never heard once of a tariff, right, then they wouldn't be bothered by it, right? Now, their life might be impacted by it, but at this point, they wouldn't have done anything because they didn't know. They didn't even know that it was taking place. They weren't paying attention. Right? And because of that, they didn't change the way that they were doing anything. If people were that, then everything would be the same that it was prior to the announcement of tariffs, because nobody would have changed anything about their behavior, right? But the constant reiterating of information that is propagandized and pushed out there and makes people absolutely clueless on what's going to happen. They have no idea. The uncertainty level is absolutely off the charts. They like uncertainty. They use it to their benefit, right? I mean, just to see it in Jefferson's speech alone, the way that they describe it, right? That when the potential for misinterpretation is especially acute when many policy speakers at the same time, or speak at the same time and disagree with each other. The diversity of viewpoints among policymakers lends to stimulating debates and ultimately better policy. Think about all the stimulating debates about tariffs and what's going to happen from it. How much is it going to create? It's going to create a lot of uncertainty. In such situations, more communication could increase rather than reduce uncertainty about the policy. In such situations, more communication could increase rather than reduce uncertainty. More communication about uncertainty. Communicating about uncertainty. 6 different articles. Like, here, let me look. Here, I'll show them to you. I got them right here. All right. Here we go. Fed John Williams says monetary policy in right place amid notable uncertainty. This is John Williams saying that. St. Louis Fed Alberto Muslim. St. Louis Fed president talks economic uncertainty, inflation in PUDAC. Hudaka. How do I say that? I don't know how to say that right. Feds barking. Extensive uncertainty could hit demand. Policy in good place. Awaiting more clarity. Who is a Kashkari, right? The Fed should stay put for extended period amid policy uncertainty. Here we go. Goolsby sees lower inflation or lower interest rates in a year's time, but warns of uncertainties. Right? The Fed's new favorite word, uncertainties. This is article right here. Let me show you. Right? This is from Yahoo Finance, right? The Fed's favorite new word, uncertainties. No kidding, right? Because it creates better monetary policy for them. They want uncertainty within the markets. They don't want you certain. If you were certain, then their words wouldn't work. You'd be like, I don't care what you say. I'm certain of what I believe, right? Doesn't matter what you think or say, Fed, right? Because I'm certain about what it is that's going on. But if I'm uncertain, I'll be hanging on every word they say. What do they say next? What are they going to do? What's happening, right? Because there's so much uncertainty over and over and over and over and over again, totally in line with their monetary policy and what it is that they are seeking to achieve. Straight up in Jefferson's speech, communicating about monetary policy given May 13th of 2024. Go read through that speech and you can see clearly that they were using uncertainty within the monetary policy communications created so that they could then talk about it in the future that would guide the markets. If you were certain about the future, their words wouldn't work. You'd be like, I don't care, right? But the moment that you're uncertain, now you care, right? They're literally playing on your fear. You know, fear of the future, fear of unknowing. All right. I want to refloor my house. I'm tired of waiting. Are we talking monetary policy? What are you guys talking about? You guys keep talking about flooring and sweating and working out. When I'm watching the analysis on Bloomberg of the Fed officials, I instantly remember you, just like DiCaprio meme watching TV, how they are manipulating the narrative to fit their needs. Yeah, once you see it, like once you see it, once you understand it, it's like it's clear as day. It's like you don't even like it isn't even like a matter of a question about what it is that's going on. You see that the inflation elevated is working out for the Fed. Like they wanted elevated inflation expectations. Once you know that they want elevated inflation expectations, and you just sit back and you're like, man, how are they going to do that if inflation is coming down? And you're thinking, man, like, you know, even all that money printing and the quantitative tightening really hasn't reeled in that much of the money supply, but yet we have inflation that went from 8-9% down to, you know, 2-3%. And like, this is not making a whole lot of sense. How is it that they are going to elevate the inflation again to achieve their monetary policy, and then all of a sudden tariffs? And you're like, wow, nobody else saw that. Nobody else saw that at all. Everybody saw that the Fed was screwed up, didn't know what they were doing, couldn't figure out how it is that they were going to bring inflation down. And I'm thinking, how is it that they're going to maintain elevated inflation? Because that's what they really wanted. Everybody says, how are they going to get it down? I'm like, how are they going to keep it up? Thinking completely opposite of what everybody else was thinking. I'm like, no, they want this inflation. They're happy with it. This is exciting for them. This is regaining their monetary policy. This is elevating the neutral interest rate. This is regaining their ammunition. Yeah. And so I think to myself, how are they going to maintain elevated inflation when the inflation expectation is now starting to fall again, and all of a sudden tariffs, creating an inflationary scenario, elevating the inflation expectation? It's totally working for the Federal Reserve. This is exactly what they wanted. And it's like, I mean, everybody else seems to look at it differently, look at it backwards from me. They're like, oh, dude, you got it so wrong. They don't know what they're doing and they're having a hard time. And I'm like, sitting on their hands, they're having a hard time. They're not doing anything. They haven't done anything. They literally did a little bit of interest rate adjustments, and they've done some balance sheet adjustments. But they have not hardly done anything. They have essentially sat on their hands for months doing nothing. And people are like, they're working hard to try and, they're not working hard. There's nothing that they're doing. They're not doing anything. Well, like just recently they did with the balance sheet adjustments, but ultimately up until just recently, they have been sitting there for months like, well, wait and see, data dependent, no like data, uncertainty, haha. The camera is showing a reversed image. Yeah, I don't know why, but the YouTube app will flip the camera around. Like when I do a regular video, it doesn't do that. Right? When I just do a recorded video, but for whatever reason, the app flips it around. I don't know why. And I don't know what I can do to fix it because I've tried. Hey, $5. Thank you so much from Tom Flo. Brief explanation, please. Is the neutral interest rate the rate that achieves 2% inflation target? Never quite understood the concept. Okay, the neutral interest rate is really easy. The neutral interest rate is when the Fed is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. It's neutral. There is no set neutral interest rate. Like nobody knows where that is. So the Fed funds rate is not something that can be pinned down to neutral because neutral is always moving. So you can't say, well, neutral interest rate is this. We're going to try and get the Fed rates to that. And when we get there, we would be at neutral because neutral is there. It doesn't work like that. Neutral is moving. Right? Now, the neutral interest rate falls on inflation expectation being low. So just think about it for yourself. Okay, let's kind of understand why the neutral interest rate would move in general. Right? If you are somebody who has elevated inflation expectation, you think that there's going to be higher prices going into the future. You think that egg prices are going to be up, car prices are going to be up, energy prices are going to be up, rent's going to be up, everything's going to be up, and you have capital in your hand. You want to invest. So you're going to put it into a safe return, something that's like a capital investment, like a money market fund or something like that. Right? Now, when you put it in there, you know that there's going to be inflation that you have to beat. And if your assumption about inflation is saying, hey, it's like running 3% right now, then you're probably going to want to get a return that's bigger than 3%. Right? Because of your elevated inflation expectation, you're going to have an elevated expectation of a capital investment return. So you're going to want bigger return on your investment, which is going to drive the interest rates higher. This is what causes mortgage rates to go up. This is the reason why you see interest rates moving up in general across the economy. It's because people are looking at the short-term idea of where they're going to put their money and say, hey, if I'm going to have to beat inflation, I'm going to have to get a bigger return for that. This is why the 10-year Treasury is one of the best things to look at, because it kind of gives you that short-term view of inflation and what it is that people are looking for, and it's the most common thing held by most banks and investments and insurance out there. So it gives you a really good idea on which direction that interest rates are going, because where the 10-year goes, pretty much all interest rates go. So understanding that your inflation expectation in general will raise the neutral interest rate, just because you will demand a higher return on your capital investments, along with the expectation that you'll be paying a higher price on things. All this in general will raise the neutral interest rate. Up until COVID, we suffered through a low inflation expectation environment. Remember how to deal with a low neutral interest rate, like monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world. It's a great speech to go and review, because in that speech he talks about the problems of having a low neutral interest rate environment due to the fact that we had a low inflation expectation. I know this stuff is difficult, but you got to hold on to it, because if you don't dig in deep, you'll never get it. All right, so understanding that the neutral interest rate will rise and fall off your inflation expectation because of the demand for capital return, or the return on capital investment, and your expectation you'll be paying a higher price on things, this elevates the neutral interest rate. So the neutral interest rate can move. Now, if the neutral interest rate is really close to zero, like nobody's got this elevated inflation expectation, people believe that it's really low, and that neutral interest rate gets very close to zero, when the Federal Reserve positions the Fed funds rate at neutral, where they're neither accommodating nor restricting the economy, when it comes time to stimulating the economy, they hit zero and they can't get far enough below neutral to actually stimulate, right? Because they only have this little tiny bit of room. Neutral, zero lower bound, no more room. This is the problem. This is the issue that the Federal Reserve was facing. This is why they were running out of monetary policy. This is why they had to turn into communications to conduct themselves, and that the adjustment of interest rates was no longer going to be an effective tool. They just didn't have any room anymore. It was gone. They did this for 10 years, right? After the great financial crisis, quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the Fed funds rate hitting the effective lower bound of zero, failed to produce inflationary scenario. It didn't work. So now, with the elevated inflation expectation, it's beginning to raise the neutral interest rate. This neutral interest rate, if it continues to tick up, the Federal Reserve can now position the Fed funds rate somewhere in the neutral zone, right? Because nobody knows exactly where that is, and still have room to stimulate the economy by dropping the interest rates. However, if that neutral interest rate is too close to zero, it's not going to work for them. So at this point, the Federal Reserve wants to remain still. They don't want to lower their Fed funds rate, regardless of what the administration says or anybody else out there. I don't care what they say. The Federal Reserve wants to keep the interest rates, the Fed funds rate, elevated, and hope to God that they have an elevated inflation expectation that is persistent going into the future, that will continue to raise the neutral interest rate. That way they can keep their Fed funds rate right where it's at, and the neutral interest rate will find them. They will no longer be restricting nor accommodating the economy. They will be at neutral, because neutral found them on the elevated inflation expectation. And then if there was a time that they did need to stimulate the economy, they'll be able to hit the lower bound again with their Fed funds rate and be far enough below neutral to actually stimulate the economy. That is what's happening. There's nothing else that's happening but that. Anybody else who wants to try and complicate it beyond that, because it's already pretty complicated, they can go ahead and try. This is what I have been saying for years. You can go back and find me talking about the neutral interest rate, and I will tell that exact same story. I didn't know how they were going to create an elevated inflation expectation going into the future. I didn't, people were just using the Biden administration. Biden did it. Biden causing inflation. It's Biden's fault. And I'm like, that guy? Holy moly, man. What an easy target. That guy didn't do anything. I don't know. Maybe he did something. I never listened to a single word Biden said. Not a single thing. All right? Not one. People were like, dude, did you hear what Biden said? And I'm like, nope, sure didn't. All right? I didn't have enough respect for him to listen. And this is what I find interesting about it, because people say I pick on Trump all the time, and I'm like, think about something. I didn't have enough respect to listen to a single word Biden says, and then people want to get mad at me when I criticize Trump? Think about that for a minute. I mean, it shows who I have respect for, or at least enough respect to listen to, right? Knowing that the Federal Reserve was looking for an elevated inflation expectation, knowing that they needed, through all these documents that I read, through everything that I have found, knowing that the neutral interest rate was their major thorn in their side, and that monetary policy was seeking to achieve inflation that was moderately above 2% for some time, how it is that the Federal Reserve was going to create a situation that had an elevated inflation expectation was beyond me, but Trump did it for him. And I'm like, whoa, no way. You boys over there wanted an elevated inflation expectation, and this dude just totally handed it to you. And he says he's mad at you guys. That was a total gift. I don't know why anybody would think that he's mad at you. He just gave him everything that you wanted. Right? I mean, Trump literally is the Fed's best friend in the entire world by creating an elevated inflation expectation through the tariff threats. It's incredible. He says, oh man, the Fed should be listening to me. They should be lowering interest rates, all this other stuff. And he just goes and creates an elevated inflation expectation beyond belief that totally is a benefit to the Federal Reserve. It's more of a benefit to the Federal Reserve than anybody else in the entire world. Right? The Fed's over there going, oh my God, that worked out so well. So well. All right. Simon, how would the Fed deal with stagflation if communication and credible threats stop working? You can't come to me with the what if. It's not a what if, it's what is. Let's talk about what is. What is working is the credible threat theory. It is totally working. You're trying to say, let's pretend like it's not working. I don't want to pretend like it's not working. I want to talk about what is working, right? It is working right now because nobody knows about it. Think about the uncertainty that is ripping through the economy. Think about how it is that they want the elevated inflation expectations. Think about what it is that is happening right now and what it is that they are saying that they needed for their monetary policy to go and say, hey, what happens when it doesn't work? What happens when, I don't know, what happens when earthquakes take out cities, right? Chaos and insanity and sadness and depression and all kinds of stuff. Like, I mean, I don't know, make up whatever you want. I mean, what ifs are what ifs. I'm not trying to be like, arrogant or cocky or something about the question of it. I mean, I know it's a real concern for a lot of people out there, but I'm not concerned about what ifs. I'm concerned about what is, right? Like, what is it that's happening? And that way I can deal with the situation, not like what if it doesn't work, You told me yesterday that it's not my job to feed you. Didn't your parents feed you when you came into the womb? Yeah, it was my parents. My responsibility to take care of my family. It is my responsibility to feed them. You're not included in that, yeah? All right. I know I don't like taxes. I do not like taxes, all right? So it's just like, the idea, didn't your parents feed you? Yes, they did. When you came out of the womb. That's right, because they created the existence that I am now here. They were responsible for my being. Once they had raised me to the 18 years old, I moved out. The day I graduated high school, I moved out. I was on my own. My wife and I were renting an apartment while we were in high school, had part-time jobs that went full-time. The day that we graduated, we were on our own. We never looked back. We are still together to this day. All right? We have a couple of kids that I am responsible for. I'm responsible for feeding my family. I work hard to acquire the things that I need in order to provide them with a decent existence that they don't have to stress about. That's not easy to do in this day and age, and it's certainly not easy to do it in the 10th most expensive place in the entire nation to have a house, to buy a house, considering cities of 10 to 50,000 people. This is hard to do it. I am proving it can be done. All right? I mean, average, everyday dude, no college education, no family wealth, no business to speak of. And yet here I am doing it. And I'm not trying to be cocky. I'm just trying to show you how it's done. What it is that I am thinking about, what it is that I see happening within the banking system that then gives me an edge over other people. And I'm not trying to say I have an edge over other people, but if I'm going to be in survival mode, that means I have to be faster than the other people in the camp. When the bear comes in, I'm going to be faster than most of the people because I'm at least paying attention to some things, right? Most people aren't paying attention, asking me, well, Dad, did I watch the game last night? I have no idea what that means. Came across an economics saying you can get rid of inequality by taxing the hell out of the rich. Something tells me he's not an economist. You're absolutely right. He is not an economist. Think about it, man. I mean, do you want to be rich someday? Would you like to have some money? Would you like to have an existence where you didn't have to think about it? You could have any car you want, travel anywhere you want, eat whatever you want, buy whatever you want. Would you like to have that sort of an existence? Do you want to be punished for doing it? Does that make sense? Like, I'm going to work real hard to acquire the things in my life that says that, man, I'm finally made it and I feel real comfortable and I get to have all these wonderful things in my life. And then the people around me say, dude, you suck. No, I don't think so. I do not feel that way. The people around me who I see who have accumulated a lot and are very wealthy, I applaud that. I think that that is a wonderful thing. And by saying, hey, we're going to tax the hell out of you because you have too much, is like saying, hey, man, I don't want anybody to work hard to acquire anything in their life because the moment that you do it, we're going to punish you. Yeah, good luck with that. All right? That's not the way this works. You want to be rewarded for your success, not punished for it. And the people around you should appreciate that. You worked hard for your success. And I'm not saying that taxes shouldn't be paid. I pay a lot in taxes. I pay a lot. Right? I don't know, like, what am I going to do? It's just like, other than bitch and complain about it, nothing. I ain't going to do nothing. Nothing I can do. Right? Pay the tax. Whatever. Right? I don't stress about it. I don't think about it. Hey, I'm just happy that I'm actually living in a country in which that I can acquire the money that I get to pay taxes with. I mean, hell yeah, cool. Well, I don't care. Right? I mean, it's just like, to me, material possessions aren't that important anyway, and all that would mean is just that I would be able to buy more material possessions anyway. So to me, I don't look at it as a negative. It's just an is, and it's not something that I approve of or disapprove of. If I had my choice, I wouldn't do it. That's not hard to say, All right, under Trump, lockdown, forced jab, and now trade wars, I'm tired of losing. Well, then don't take the information as losing. Simon, I never asked you before, do you have private health, unemployment, and life insurance? Not that it's anybody's business about any of that, but I do. All right. Simon, I heard that building permits and new starts are matching almost exactly with levels they were in May of 07. That's right. In the lead up to 08 crisis. No, I don't believe that. So let's look it up right now. I believe that they are matching 2018. Because, you think about it, they really shot up during COVID. Permit issuance went through the roof. And I don't know how many people realize that, but let me just punch it in here. Permit issuance. Fred. If you type in just about anything you want to know about, oh, come on now. Like if you want to see a chart on just about anything, permit issuance, single family, multifamily, housing starts, completions, all that stuff, just type in housing completions, housing starts, permit issuance, and type the word Fred, F-R-E-D, in behind it. So let me go into permit issuance. Let's try this again. Permit issuance, Fred. All right, so newly private housing. Yeah, it is about the same as it was in 2000 and 2001. Maybe a little bit less than that. And right now they're sitting at about 2020, 2019, just before COVID. So they're sitting at the same levels they were right before COVID. However, during COVID, they shot up dramatically, like way high. Just to give you an example, it shows here on this scale of thousands of units. So this would be like 1,915,000 units. So like 1.9 million or whatever the math is on that. 1,915 times 1,000. That's how many permits were being issued in 2021. Right now, that number is down around 14,590. I'm sorry, 1,459, down from 1,915. So it's a pretty dramatic fall. I mean, you think about it, what is that, like close to 25% drop in permit issuance, but it's still at the same level that it was at back in 2020, 2019, right? And then as far as like prior to the great financial crisis, it peaked out in September of 2005 at 2,263. So here, let me show you this scale. All right, so this is the scale. This is the full thing. Right here, this is where we're at. This was like 2019, and this was the great financial crisis right over here. So you can see like the permit issuance right now is not like up here at the great financial crisis level. In fact, even back here way before the great financial crisis, it still wasn't even peaking out there. This is like, back in the 90s. In fact, really, if you think about it, this chart, where we are, is pretty like, it peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys. It's like right in the middle. Like this is like typical of where we would be. And the reason why it feels painful is because we've been falling off of the massive permit issuance that had been taking place over the last couple of years. So if you're issuing out a lot of permits and then you're slowing down on that permit issuance as you're going into the future, it feels painful, right? A slowdown. It's not like we're slowing down to a crash, like, oh man, they're not issuing out permits. They're just not issuing out nearly as many as they have been over the previous few years. Although if you take it back a few years before that, we're really compared to that kind of level, right? And it was still underperforming, like you think. Like this whole gap right here, this huge gap in production from right through here, this big dip in permit issuance, that it needs to be made up for. Like you have to have a huge spike. Like, I understand this spike created the dip, right? But the gap in production creating so few homes, right? The lack of homes here in the United States, that gap in production needs to be made up for. It's hardly been made up for. We moved up to slightly above what would be considered average going back decades. We barely moved above it, and now we're following back down to the average. How do you make up for a gap in production? You got to ramp up production way beyond that of what it is that would be considered average. But we're not doing it. That's the reason why we have such a limitation in houses. This is essentially the Cantillon effect playing out. Property ownership, people who have the money, people who have first access to the money, they are the ones who get access to the houses. They're the ones who are going to be separating themselves from everybody else. And one of the reasons is because you just simply don't have access to property anymore. They're not producing it. An individual at a time back in the early 80s, you go back to the early 80s here, permit issuance had fallen way low. It was down at 748, right? Like we didn't even, during the great financial crisis, it fell below that. But really, right now, we are so far above like some of these bottoms. Like you think about it, look at some of these drops, these valleys inside of permit issuance and where we are today. Like we're not even close to being at the valleys. We're like we got a lot of business going. We got a lot of activity happening. The problem, right? And then people like listen to me and they're like, dude, you kind of sound you're contradicting everything that you're saying. The problem that we are facing now is we are not ramping up production. You got to ramp up production to make up for the gap in production that had been taking place. That is not happening. And so long as that doesn't happen, then you're going to have a limitation of houses that are out there, which is going to mean that property values are probably not going to go down. When you have this huge ramping up of production that took place prior to the great financial crisis, look at this. This was ramping up production nonstop for decades. Like how long did that go for? That went from 1990 to 2005. All right. It was almost nonstop, ever increasing amounts of permit issuance. Think about it. You could start a construction business and almost guarantee that you're going to have more business the next year than you had this year. And every year for 15 years. Like that would create an environment in which that people would be very excited about watching their history of their business just get better and better and better and better. Right? Only to get to the great financial crisis and absolutely crash. And then since 2005 all the way till about 2018, there was an underproduction of homes. Right? 2005 to 2018, almost 15 years, right? Well, how long is that? That's 2005, 8 years? When is that? Hold on, let me make sure. Yeah, 2005 to about 2018, so 13 years, a little over 10 years, right? That it took just to get to the point where you're breaking even, like essentially on your average homes, like on the permit issuance. We haven't even come close to ramping up production. Not even close. We are so underproduced right now from the great financial crisis and that dip the largest dip in history, and it stayed down for a very long time. You know, to me, I just don't see anywhere where there could be a housing market crash, considering the very few homes that have been built over the last few years. I mean, other than the short stretch during the COVID time, you know, a lot of permit issuance there. All right. Do you think shelter is how they control the masses, basic necessities, the rich control? I don't think anybody controls me, man. Like, I think people control other people's mindsets, their idea of what it is that's happening out there. I don't feel controlled. You know? And so when, you know, people say, do you like the whole idea of it, are they the shelter the shelter itself is limited because it's the condition in which that we are in the economy based on history. Look at the Cantillon effect. He talks about it. He talks about the property owners, right? And how they are limited, and how the people who are finding that the abundance of money that is coming in, the people who have first access to it, end up separating themselves from everybody else, making that property ownership almost impossible. Like, this isn't something that they are doing. They are taking advantage of it. If you think that they are in control, they're not. They just happen to be understanding of the situation and know how to position themselves accordingly for it. Then we look at that and say, wow, because you are so successful at it, you really must know what's going on. And because we suck at it, then you must be in control, and we're just having to deal with your controlling issues. All right? Like, I think that's kind of the speaking of it, but I don't believe that to be the case. Because once you understand what it is that you need to do to be out of their control, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what that would be, but ultimately to not take on debt, but to take on capital investments that have a return, stock dividends, businesses, rental incomes, these kind of positions, all of a sudden you'll have people saying that you're one of the people who are in control, right? You're the reason why rents are so high, and you're the reason, like, all this other stuff. And ultimately, they would be right, because property owners and capitalists are the ones who dictate the economy. They are the ones who are in control. But you can be one of those people. So it's not they, it's right? It's a position that you have not taken, nor have I. Like, I can see it, I understand it. I would like to be there someday, not necessarily somebody who's calling shots, but to understand that I need to be in a position of being a capitalist, being the property owner, being a business owner, being something of this nature in order to have that position. Otherwise, we're going to be subject to somebody else's wants, desires, and beliefs, because they're the property owners, right? Once you're the property owner, you're not subject to that anymore. I learned my next home is just going to be bought with cash, just chilling. After that bounce, big crash on the way. Fanta, we shall see, I suppose. Brody, you didn't answer my question. Let me cruise back up here a little ways. All right, back down to the bottom. Even the rich are subjected to certain limitations. Well, absolutely they are. But when you think about it, like, the rich, you know, we're a consumer based. This is what I find very interesting. This is why I just think about everything on my, like, I'm it. Like, I mean, when it comes to authority, when it comes to decisions, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to everything out there, I'm it. Like, I don't, like, other people and stuff like that, they're not the ones who I find important in my decision making. I need to figure this thing out for myself. Now, something that I found very, very interesting is that the more I get to thinking about the consuming that takes place here in the United States, when they are trying to produce a consumer, you really think about it, the 1% is the ones who are in charge. They do 50% of the consumption, almost 50%, just 1% of the people. That's not a lot. That's not a lot of people to be in such control of such a massive portion of the consumption of the economy. which I think is just incredible to think about. So if you're going to influence consumption, you really only have to influence 1% of the people, right? If you can influence that 1% of the people, then the rest of the people will essentially follow, because everybody follows the wants and needs and desires of the property owners. So this is really how the economy operates, and people just can't see that, and it's really difficult to see when you think about, like, well, why is it that they produce all this stuff that everybody can buy, right? But ultimately, all the spending that's being done, the majority of it, is being done by the rich. And we are only buying the necessities. We don't increase or decrease our consumption on a massive scale when you're a working class citizen. You really don't have any room to increase your consumption outside of maybe credit card issuance or a car loan or a house loan. But ultimately, your consumption is limited to your daily income or your monthly income. And so when you think about it in this fashion, like increasing, decreasing consumption doesn't really exist within the people themselves, unless it is that there's a job change or an increase in employment where people who weren't working are now working. But even in that sense, all the effort, all the time, all the ability really only will represent 50% of the consumption that's taken place out there. And your individual part is very small and minute in the grand scheme of it all. An individual inside of the 1% makes a profound difference. How much they decide. Like if the 1% decide that they're not going to spend, that they're going to cut back on their spending, it makes a huge difference within the economy. But to get the other 99% to cut back on their consumption, that's probably a little more difficult to do, right? Or increase their consumption, considering that they're limited inside of their, like, you know, they have necessities. That's is it. They either buy the necessities or they don't. And since it's a necessity, they're going to buy it if they absolutely have to. And if they can't increase their consumption, this is it. That's as far as they go. So 99% of the people don't really make any difference. But they can influence the 1% that make a huge difference. And that's sad. That's what's scary about this whole thing. Right? How insignificant and really inconsequential we really are on the grand scheme of things. Every time they come out there on the TV and they're flapping their gums about whatever it is that's going on out there, I'm thinking to myself, are you talking to me or are you talking to the 1%? Because I don't think I matter to you. I don't think I make a bit of difference. But the influence coming from the 1%, that's a huge difference. Huge difference, all right? Well, if you see the 5% shopping in Walmart looking for bargains, you know we are effed. Haha, yep. Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation. I care not who makes its laws. 99% of the 1% inherited the bulk of the wealth. That's right, Ponder. It's a debt-based system. By silver, platinum, and crystallized osmium, which I'm still not sure what that is. Why is the house windows behind your seat slanted? What? Global dollar shortage, treasury illiquid, and causing issues in repo market. Fed looking to create bailout for hedge funds holding treasuries. Thoughts, UE? I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if like there was a need to have a facility to swap out them treasuries for cash or something like that if there was ever like a liquidity issue, but I don't really see that taking place. The discount window is something that they have talked about quite a bit over the last year for a place for banks and I don't know, maybe even other institutions to be able to borrow, to find that liquidity that they need. They can get it at the discount window, which has always been something that was like looked upon as a bad thing. Like if you went to the discount window, it was like it held this stigma of like, ooh, you're in trouble or something of that nature. But over the last year, and even more, I believe now, that they have tried to create a system inside of the financial institutions where they are forced to use the discount window at certain times of the year. Like they have to use it like a couple of times a year. That way, when people are going or when banks are using the discount window, they're not looked upon as being like a negative, or it's not looked on as a negative, right? Because the discount window was always held the stigma that if you went there, you were in trouble or something. But if you are forced to use it a couple of times a year, then people wouldn't really pay attention to whether or not there was an issue going on at the bank because everybody's using the discount window, right? So basically, it kind of masks over issues that may be taking place with liquidity going on at these banks or a particular bank so that they don't get the finger pointed at them. Does that kind of make sense? So, I mean, I haven't heard much talk beyond them trying to set this up and create this, sort of environment for these banks to use the discount window without repercussion. But whether or not that's an actual thing that's happening on a massive scale yet, I haven't heard that part. All right. Do you think markets are going for a dip, Simon? I hear a lot of chatter out there. I have no idea. I did sell out of a bunch of stock just to let people know. I mean, I said it the other day on a video, but I'll just, mention it again just for people who do follow that kind of thing. I sold out of Altria, I sold out of ExxonMobil, and I sold out of the Vanguard Russell 1000 ETF position that I held. And I'm using that money to pay off debt that I could not seem to knock out last year that I was trying to. So I'm going to use that money to pay off the debt that I have and then hopefully be essentially debt-free besides the mortgage. And that's what I'm doing with that money. But anyway, I didn't do it because I think there's going to be a crash in the market. I did it because I want to get out of debt. But I did sell out of a position. So if it happens to go down, I was pretty fortunate of that. I'm still holding the other positions. And then I haven't been buying anything because, again, I've been saving up to try and get out of debt. So I've been paying my debts off instead of buying into that position. But great call on selling out at the highs, UE making smart moves. Well, again, like I didn't do it because I'm trying to market time. It just happens to be my time in the market to try and use that money for something else. It worked out pretty well that I am getting out right now with so much worry and uncertainty and all that coming to the future. If it does happen to go down, hey, cool. I timed it out fairly decently for that, but it's not because of a decision that I was making like, hey, I want to get out of the market right now. It's because I want to get out of debt, which is like whatever, like, I mean, call it for what it is, good timing or a smart move, whatever. It's I have to learn. I don't know anything about timber. Yeah, it's not easy to understand the whole timber industry because a lot of times people look at the forest industry and then they look at the lumber industry and they think that these two are kind of the same thing, but they're not. Like lumber and timber are both part of the forestry industry, but they're not necessarily the same industry themselves. Timber has a huge exporting market to it. So we cut raw logs and send them over to China. And then we also have a lumber industry in which that you saw those raw logs into boards. That's a whole other industry within itself. So understanding, like, when you hear, oh man, 25% tariff on Canadian lumber, and then Trump comes out, we're going to open up forestry lands. And I'm like, wait a minute, bro, that's two different industries taking place right there. You can't say we're going to benefit one by increasing the other. Like, you can increase the timber production, but that doesn't increase the demand for lumber, right? So it's just like, that doesn't make sense, especially if you destroy the exporting market for timber, because that's a huge portion of the reason why people cut down as many trees as they do in this country. It's not so we can mill them up for ourselves. It's so we can literally send those trees over to another country because it's an agricultural product just like any other agricultural product, like soy or corn or anything else. trees are another form of agricultural products. It just takes a lot longer to get to harvest, right? But it's still essentially the same type of thing that's happening there. Boards are an industrial material production item that, although is made from the timber, it's a different industry. It's like the demand for timber, or the demand for lumber here in the United States, doesn't necessarily reflect the demand for timber, because there could be a huge demand for timber outside of the United States, right? You see how that's kind of happens there? What's Mama doing? She's cleaning up the garage, I guess. All right. Appreciate this group, and the knowledge sharing has helped my portfolio positioning significantly. Understanding Fed speak has my eyes wide open now. Thinking about COVID now make me sick. Yeah, well, you know, you're welcome, man, and thank you for being here and being part of the group. Did you get the car fixed, the transmission? I didn't. And ultimately, because I have 3 vehicles and we don't need a 4th car, and spending the money on a transmission would mean that by the time we pay off the car and pay for a new transmission, the car would not be worth the money. So the return on the investment would actually go negative, because we would have a car that we would then not be able to sell for nearly what it is worth. We would just be dumping thousands of dollars into transportation that we don't need. Now, granted, the car is in fine shape. There's nothing wrong with the motor. There's really nothing wrong with the car itself. There's a little cosmetic issues with it, but it is an older vehicle. It's literally just the transmission, and from what I gather, these particular transmissions are incredibly fragile. I didn't know it, but Mike Martins was a transmission guy back in the day, and he was telling me all about it when we were hanging out the other day, about how fragile these particular transmissions are. So getting a used transmission doesn't really excite me, considering that we don't know how long that one would last if we were to go that route to try and save a few dollars. And getting a rebuilt one, again, would just put the cost of the transmission so exceedingly high comparatively to what it is that we own this vehicle, that it just simply would not make sense to repair this vehicle at this time. As an investment point of view, I can keep the thousands of dollars, still have transportation, and just literally pay off the car and pitch it and just get rid of it. Like, that to me so far makes the most sense. Lucky for me, I have a barn, so I'm gonna wheel it into the barn and, you know, give it a little bit more consideration before I finally, you know, throw it away. Besides, I have to pay for it first, so I got, you know, quite a few $1,000s that I have to pay on that car to get out from underneath it, and I have to do that right away, considering that you're making full coverage insurance payments on it as well. So, you know, that's the position that I ended up having to take with it, and it's one of the things that is actually going to end up holding me back from going to the Rebel Capital this year, if I cannot figure out a way to generate some more money, or enough money to cover all that stuff. So, you know, such is life, but, you know, very much makes me consider wanting to take a sponsorship, you know, to pay for all that, but, you know, whatever. All right. You can buy a whole car for the price of the trans. Yep, that's what I'm getting at. In fact, I just bought a whole Suburban for half of what that transmission would cost. Right? Ever since I got a smaller Galaxy, I can't type anything correctly. All right, I see vehicle as a cost of doing business, ultimately a net loss. I don't see it as an investment. Yeah, I don't either, and that's why I'm looking at it thinking, okay, what do I do? Put the thousands of dollars into repairing the car, or consider that I already have transportation and I don't need that in my life? I would much rather have the thousands of dollars than to have a 4th vehicle, right? That isn't worth, I would not be able to sell it for what it's worth, or what I had put into it, right? I mean, I'd be able to sell it for what it's worth, but that's it. And what it's worth is not It would not reimburse me, you know, the investment into it. It's just not there. Gammon can afford to travel. Well, he hasn't offered it up, but if he did, I would totally accept it. Maybe you could go. Maybe you could do a GoFundMe for the Rebel Capitalist trip. Yeah. Oneida kind of brought that up to me as well to possibly do that one. Like I said, I was really trying to figure out on my own on what it is that I could do to try and, you know, get all these different things done, but it's ultimately I gotta get out of debt, and then once I am out of debt, then I'd feel a lot more comfortable about figuring out where it is that I could spend my money. You know, if it was 6 months down the road, 8 months down the road, I, you know, probably wouldn't be thinking too much about it, just do it, but you know, it's going to come up a lot quicker than I'm even realizing. So yeah. Alrighty, guys, having fun. We got 127 likes, 170 people watching. Go hit that like button. We'll see if we can get it up to 200, 250 people watching. Go hit the share button too. You can always share the video out there. Go share it on, you know, X. Go share it out there on, you know, Facebook or whatever. And you can get more people to join in by doing that. So, I agree. If the repair costs more than the value of the car, it's not worth fixing. It's not. And like considering that I owe $4,000 on it, it's just like by the time I would be done, it would be like $10,000 or something into a vehicle that I might be able to sell for $4,000, right? $4,000, $5,000 if I'm lucky, if I really clean it up and polish it up, make it look nice. So it's just not worth it to me at all. So yeah, but anyway, like I said, I got a barn, so I'm just gonna wheel it into the barn for now, and you know, I can sit in there for a little bit. Sounds like things are getting tight, Simon. Yeah, you know, at times that happens, but it's life, and it's not the first time that it's happened. You know, I mean, if you were here a couple of years ago, you would have seen me going through something very similar when I bought the house and essentially put every single dime that I had going into the down payment of the house, which essentially left me with $300 in my bank account. You want to talk about things being tight? Woo! But luckily for me, I'm in the flow of money, so you know, here in a couple of weeks, I'm going to get a paycheck, and then I'll get some Google money, and I'll get some affiliate money, and then I'll get another paycheck, and then I'll be back into the swing of things like I always am, because that's what I'm doing, is constantly pursuing, right? Not even pursuing, just being in the energy of receiving. That's what I am doing, all right? I'm in the energy of receiving, just constantly being in position of it. Okay? Do this. Here in a little bit, I'm going to go and call bingo. Tomorrow, I'll go to work, make another video, go and do something else, whatever it happens to be. You know, it's peaks and valleys. Everything is. It's never going to be an uphill ride all the way. If you think it is, you are going to suffer in pain and misery in the worst possible fashion. Knowing that you're going to go through peaks and valleys says, hey man, while things are running up and it's looking really good, you think to yourself, enjoy it while it lasts, because at some point all good things come to an end. All good things come to an end. All of them. All good things. Right? It isn't going to be good forever. Right? Oh man, this ribeye is awesome. It's really good. It's going to come to an end. Eventually I'm going to finish it and it's going to be over, and then I won't have the ribeye anymore. I will have consumed it. All good things come to an end. Just know that. Peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys. When you're in the valley, embrace it. Right? Just like now. It's just like, man, I got these debts. They're overhanging. I can't seem to get it paid off last year. What am I going to do? This seems very, I don't want to be in this. Okay, that's cool. I don't want to be in the energy of flow. I want to be in the energy of receiving, right? Because I've been in the energy of flow where money literally flows past me. I get it, and then I give it to somebody else. And I get it, and I give it to somebody else. And I'm thinking, I'm tired of that. Get out of the debt. Get out of those things. Move into the position of receiving, and then it'll be that much easier. So you go from the valley and back up to the peaks again. All right, most people increase overhead when things are good. No rainy day funds. No, that's a terrible idea. My favorite X-Beatle album. All right. Planet Earth will always be a good thing, though, regardless of its peaks and valleys. Death and rebirth is a lovely cycle. Imagine if the 172 people watching gave $5 to $10 to give you a rebel capitalist. To give is to receive. Okay, I tell you what, that is a wonderful idea, Tom Flo. I really appreciate that. And Tom, like, I don't know what it is that we could do to create like I don't like necessarily just want to do a GoFundMe link. Like, here's a GoFundMe, just go and contribute a bunch of money to that. What I would much rather do is collect super chats for breaking down monetary policy or doing, you know, something as far as like here on YouTube. And then I could feel like I'm giving something for it, right? Now, already we're out here, we're doing that, so I don't know what it is that I can do to try and enhance that, except for just to simply ask, send me super chats, right? But I figured if you were going to do that, you probably would have done that anyway, so that's not something that I think I can promote, right? Or at least it's not something I feel like I can promote. Instead, I just try to come out here and try to deliver good information that would be somewhat useful, that people would want to share, and by doing that I can actually accumulate the ad revenue through my channel, through the watching of the videos, that would be enough to fund everything all on its own. But getting the super chats would be an awesome way of doing it, you know. And if anybody has a better idea than just literally just sending me super chats, I'm not sure what it is that I can do. The GoFundMe page, like a GoFundMe thing, would be cool, but I figure you could already do that right here, right now. You know? GoFund has a fee. Gave my grandson 100, and it cost me 115. Yeah, and you actually lose quite a bit here on YouTube doing the super chat thing, but I figure it's a platform that makes it really easy. Really, you could send me PayPal, you can send me Venmo, you can send me Cash App, you can mail it to me. Right, there's a PO box. There's all kinds of ways you can send me money, and I don't want to sit out here and e-bag, but trying to figure out how to get to the rebel capitalist here is a little hard for me, right? So I could do a sponsorship and just knock it out and just be done with it, but I really don't like the whole sponsorship idea. I mean, I've considered it. I've even actually talked to a couple of sponsors lately just to see what they have to offer, and I tell you, they offer good money. They offer a lot. For 30 seconds of video, they offer you a lot of money. Like, I could make way more money. Like, if I could just do sponsorships, like the ad revenue would seem almost useless if I did the sponsorships, you know? Do a sponsorship. Yeah, I know I should. Do you think dollar will lose more value than stock because of inflation? Well, inflation would cause stock prices to go up and dollar value to go down, right? Like, inflation causes prices to move up on everything and dollar value to go down. So inflation would cause, right, cause stock. Deflation would cause the opposite. You know, cause dollar to strengthen and stock prices to go down. You can send me crypto, yeah. How much do you need to go to the rebel capitalist? I don't know exactly. You know, I would imagine tickets down there for the wife and I would end up being like, I don't know, I can't remember, I haven't priced them out for a while, but I would only assume that they're probably around $800 or so, and then the hotels, they're kind of pricey, so it'd probably be another, you know, $800 there, so somewhere around 15, I guess, $15 to $2,000 with the expenses of food and all that other things. That would probably be like on the higher end. I could probably do it for less than that if I was, you know, paying attention to it. But somewhere around there, I would guess $1,500, $2,000. Man, hey Sarah. Hey, they want to know how much it would cost us to go to the Rebel Capitalist if they were to pay for it.
To go to Rebel Capitalist?
Yeah.
For what, 2 nights?
2 nights, yeah. 2 nights and 2 nights and flights.
2 nights and flights. Looking at probably at least $1,500.
Yeah, she said $1,500 too. So that's what I said. $1,500. All right. Oh yeah, and all-nighter too. So that's at least, well, all-nighters tickets, and in addition into the hotel. So yeah, what, probably 23? What would we say, $2,300?
2 grand at least, yeah.
2 grand to include all-nighter.
At least, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, $2,300. That's an ounce of gold. Yeah, it is. That is expensive, but I guess it's worth it. Well, yeah, and that's like, and that's not even paying for the ticket to get into the Rebel Capitalist. I'm just assuming George will give me one, because if I showed up there and I'm like, George, I didn't buy one, I'm just coming in, right? I'm sure he would let me in, but I'd probably let him know I'm on my way first. Motel 6, bed bugs are a great conversationalist. He spoke on it weeks ago. Add another gram for the crazy mod. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Let's see here. All Nighter says, Wayne and I are scheduled to talk about planning the trip too. We're thinking frugal. Yeah, like my sister, I mean, but she lives hours away. Like she lives in Florida, but she lives hours away from where the Rebel Capitalist is being held. So it's like I don't really like can stay at her place, because it would be like traveling back and forth to the event would seem kind of like, a lot, being hours away. So, I mean, it would be nice to include a visit with her in the trip, but again, it's like, have you seen any of your fellow capitalists saying that gold standard would still work today? I don't. I mean, I understand the theories behind it. I just don't believe them. Oh, I believe that they would work. What I don't believe is that they would work for the American people, as most of us would end up falling. Most of us, I would probably do okay. Most of the working class people would fall into poverty and misery due to the fact that the standard of living that we now live in this country would immediately export all the gold, and we would have none to do commerce with. And so ultimately, if you were in possession of gold and silver, it would be a pretty good deal for you, because if you did it right, you would probably do quite well during those times. Everybody else would suffer the consequences, as economic activity would essentially diminish, as our purchasing of foreign products would send all our gold to other nations. So, or we would have to, like, because of the high standard of living. So you could diminish your standard of living and live like, incredibly poor, which is the pain and misery, or you can experience the pain and misery after you let all the gold go by. So. Airbnb would work with a rental car and group rate. Yeah, we've done that going to Vegas. That's how we kind of do it going there. Hard currency standards don't work long term. The economy needs elasticity. Yeah. RV rental for the trip would be cool. Taste of your possible retirement for the road trip. Yeah, that would be cool. Government confiscated gold before. Yeah, see, that's the other thing. Like, you think about it, when we were on a gold standard, what was the last thing you remember experiencing while still being on the gold standard? Confiscated gold. Can you imagine going back to the gold standard? Would they have to confiscate it again? Think about it. Like, if you had to go back to a gold standard, what would that look like? Like, the last thing we remember before getting off the gold standard was they had it all confiscated. And then they relinquished the gold standard and said, okay, yeah, you can own it again. So if we go back on a gold standard, are they going to confiscate all the gold? Just saying. I mean, how else are they going to get it? All the gold is gone. The aliens harvested it. Voluntary gold turn-in confiscation. Ponder don't work. It's not quite the right way to say it. It's more that it's just hard. If everyone viewing gave $15, you'd have $2,000. Yeah, I mean, there's a, like, most of my videos, if I didn't put it in this one, most of my videos have a PayPal, Venmo, Cash App link, and then there's also a PO box you can just send me money to. I understand, like, if people were to just, like, if every single subscriber to the channel was to just become a member of the channel and give me $1 a month, I can make $100,000 a month. But, you know, I mean, you know, not everybody's going to join the channel or become a member of the channel, and not everybody's going to send me money. I think, like, I should provide something. Like, I just don't think I should ask for money and say, hey, just send me money. I think I should provide you guys with something, and that's why I'm like, that's why I do these videos, is because I feel like I'm giving you something, and in return, I get the views, I get the, you know, super chats, I get the ad revenue, I get, you know, the options of possible things that come into the future when opportunity presents itself. Like, these things I get for coming out here and sharing my thoughts and ideas and not really asking anything for it. But when I ask for it, I don't feel like I'm doing it right. I don't feel like I'm doing the universe right, you know. You provide something good and useful, and then the good, you know, the good comes back to you. And that's how I've always tried to do it, you know. Speaking of which, it is very well worthwhile joining the channel. Please consider it. Thank you, Brody. Alright, I got bus converted into an RV, think Greyhound, old silver sides. It ain't cheap to drive around. Laugh out loud. That 8V71 Detroit can chug diesel. I can imagine, man. Seriously, on sponsorships, where can we hit you up about that? Mail you something to your P.O. box? Yep. Down in the description of just about every single one of my videos is a link to all the different places that you could send me money. And then there's also a link, there's also a P.O. box down in the description as well, to so that you can do it that way. What are these guys doing? I think Sarah's selling these shelves off. We have a bunch of shelves in here. All right, see, it's already started, man. Thank you so much for the 20 Canadian dollars there. Here's 20 Canadian, should equal about 15 bucks. It does. It landed about 15 bucks up there. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right, noticing my bodywork guy is in the 60s, almost retired. Do you think it's a good idea for a young person to go into bodywork? Less people experienced. Well, I think having any kind of skill like that would be worth it. I mean, there's always probably going to be a demand for, I'm assuming, auto body work is what you're talking, like, you know. Anyway, I would assume that that would be something that would be useful going into the future and going to have some kind of demand for it. It's like there will always be demand for body work. As, you know, cars get in accidents, get dinged up or whatever, need repairs. So, I mean, yeah, like if it's something that you're into, I wouldn't necessarily pick that one out as like the industry of industries to be in as far as like awesomeness. But if you're into it, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to do that. DOGE needs to audit California. 100% off your taxes. Shout out all members. Yeah, P Nice, thank you guys. Jeff Brewer for being here. You guys are awesome. Brody All-Nighter. Justin, I see you guys up in here. Deja Vu. Alright, I would donate, but I lost the card this account has, right? Rough night at the bar. Now, what does that say? Now cards just on auto pay. Most trades are good to get into. Most trades are good to, yeah, I would kind of agree. Like, you know, if you could ever learn how to be anything out there, like anything, it doesn't really matter what it is. I mean, hell, even like doing something like shoe repair, which seems really odd. You know, you think about it, there's probably a demand for it somewhere, and having that sort of skill is probably very unique, right? But again, like if you're wanting to just be anywhere in the world, being a shoe, you know, being somebody who like repairs shoes isn't exactly like, you know, gonna have you like all kind of job opportunities, right? Oh, alrighty guys, we're getting into 2 hours. I know we're having a lot of fun here, but I'm thinking I might have to call it quits after just the 2 hour mark here. Thank you, Simon. We appreciate you. Well, I appreciate you guys doing all the work you do for the channel. Watching your channel is guilt-free for me because I'm learning and being inspired. Appreciate all you do, Simon. Well, thank you, man. Some shoe repairmen are huge on YouTube. Yeah, and that's where I'm kind of getting at. Like, you know, I mean, you just probably couldn't pop up in any town you want. Like, if you were a mechanic or a cook, like, you know, you could prepare food at a restaurant. If you could have those two jobs, you probably could go just about anywhere in the entire country and find a job, right? You know, as a mechanic or a cook, right? That's like, those are two very common jobs anywhere. Shoe repair might be a little more difficult. Like if you had your own business repairing shoes, like you might be able to pop up and say, hey man, I got all my equipment in my van or whatever, I can repair in my van, and have a business like that. And that might be fairly successful to take from town to town. But you know, for the most part, if you didn't grow up in that industry or have a business already established that you're working on, trying to establish that sort of business might be a little more difficult than, I don't know, maybe it's easier than I think. Maybe there's a huge repair for shoe, or demand for shoe repair. What do I know? Not many shoe reparations around. Old shoe repair guys said sneakers put him out of business. Beto's leatherwork has more demand than he can handle. Any trade is the next millionaire's low-cost entry. All right. Oh, thanks, All Nighter. I appreciate that, man. He posting out the links to the Venmo account and stuff. Yeah, I would appreciate it. That would be awesome, because I would like to go to the Rebel Capitalists. That would be a lot of fun. You know, those guys down there, they're about the best. You know, they're like really an elite group, and it's like one of the, like a very almost like prestigious like event. And not to knock it, because I'm going to talk nothing but good stuff about the Rebel Capitalist, I still think I like Zuber's conference more. I do. I think the people at the Zuber conference is a lot more engaging with each other, doing the networking thing. It's really good positive energy amongst everybody. It's just a really good time. Rebel Capitalist is too, but I think it's like, I wouldn't necessarily, it just, I don't know, like a little more up, like clicky, I guess. I don't even know how the word to describe it. It's still a lot of fun. Everybody has a great time. They all network and kind of do the same thing, and it's a lot of fun to be at. But I think the Zuber conference just carries a little bit better vibe to it. It's just really what it comes down to. You know? Maybe because it's a smaller event, so it's like a little bit more tight knit. But still, the Rebel Capitalist is probably like got the best speakers that you could ever possibly imagine. And I have to give it to like Brent Johnson and Jeff Snyder. Those are two of my favorite guys to listen to. They put out some really good information. The dollar milkshake theory, the euro dollar thing, so good, so good. But honestly, Mark Moss puts on the best presentation of anybody. It is so engaging, so entertaining, so filled with information. It's a lot of fun to watch. So, you know, Mark Moss is an excellent presentation there. And then Sarah's favorite is Jason Hartman. You know, is a house expensive? Is real estate expensive? Compared to what, right? Compared to what? Be safe, people. A lot of trades are being franchised and made corporate. Yeah. You know, if Simon's economic theory works out here in the United States, repairmen are going to be rock stars because nobody's going to be able to buy anything new. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, I say it's going to happen. I think that's a little, I think that would be a little bit disingenuous to say. Right? If Simon's economic theory works out here in the United States, I think, like, I mean, I think that's inevitable, but I don't know if it's necessarily going to happen in a timeline that is like guaranteed for us. I don't know how they're going to figure out a way to inject new money into the system, but I'm assuming that new money will be coming into the system. And if new money comes into the system, then we're going to see separation between the rich and the poor. The moment that that stops, then you're going to find everybody falling into pain and misery, and that's where I think the repair guy is going to be very successful. So in that sort of timeline, okay. Yeah. Let's cruise down here a little bit. Do you think Trump will be mouthpiece for the Fed for the 4 years? No, I don't think Trump is going to have any kind of influence over the Federal Reserve, nor is the Federal Reserve going to be influenced by Trump. I don't think that's going to be the play. I think right now, I think they're working together. I mean, I honestly do. I think that the Federal Reserve is looking for an elevated inflation expectation, and Trump is delivering it. Like, to me, they're buddy buddies in the background. Like, they're hanging out and playing video games and taking bong hits together. Like, they're bros, you know? Different animals. Zubers is more beginner and family oriented. RCL is more ambitiously success driven. Yeah, that's actually a really good way of describing it, all-nighter. That is absolutely a really good way of doing it. Beginners, family oriented, trying to get it off the ground, people who are successful and ambitious. Yes, I totally get it. You're absolutely right. I never thought about it that way. I wish I had. All right, smaller event, typically more intimate. Yeah. I gotta run, guys. Hopefully catch you on the next stream. Well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate the super chat and the encouragement. Trump's tariffs. Do you think that will be Fed strategy for 4 years? No. I want to see what the statement on long run what is that consensus statement? What do they call that thing? I always get it wrong. Where is that? Here we go. The statement on long-run goals and monetary policy strategies. It's so simple. I don't know why I can't say that right. That's also referred to as the consensus statement. Whatever that says, at the end of the summer here, or sometimes towards the end of summer, they're going to come out with a new statement on long-run goals and monetary policy strategies. There's going to be a new consensus statement. Inside of that, we will be looking for the words, in order to anchor long-term inflation expectations at this level, the committee seeks to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, and therefore judges that following periods when inflation has been running persistently below 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. I will be looking for those words. If those words are written in the new statement on long-run goals and monetary policy strategies, which will be coming out sometime towards the end of summer, if those words are written in that consensus statement, then I will say yes, that they are pushing for a higher inflation and that they would be using the tariffs for that. But until that statement comes out, I'm just saying what they're doing right now. Because what's happening right now is the Federal Reserve is receiving inflation that is moderately above 2%, and the credible threat of tariffs seems to be doing it. That's what I'm saying. Bong hit bros. Yeah, they are. All right. Really late to stream, but glad I'm here. Yeah, well, I'm glad you're here too, and I appreciate you. We're going to call it quits here in just a minute. I'm going to go in, and Freddie needs to get the chicken coop all secured in because we had possum or raccoon infiltration into it last season, and it killed our birds off. And the one hen that was left, I took down to the neighbors and said, here, save this poor girl because the raccoons are tearing my birds apart. So we're going to get the coop all secured in, and we are going to be raising turkeys for 4-H. So Freddie's really looking forward to that. Alrighty, guys. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the live stream. 2 hours, much longer than I was anticipating. I hope everybody enjoyed the beginning as we run over and help the neighbor get his car started. That was kind of a lot of fun to have happen right as the stream was getting going. But, you know, we break this stuff down. We are understanding the credible threat theory. We are learning it for ourselves so that we can internalize the information, so that we can see it in our day jobs in real time when we're gathering information, so that we can make the best decisions for ourselves. And I know that nobody's doing it like we're doing it. We are literally the only ones who are breaking this stuff down like this. So feel you know, enjoy the uniqueness of it, I guess, because you are literally the only person in the handful of people here on the Uneducated Economist who are watching these videos, who are understanding the credible threat theory, who understand moderately above 2% for some time, who are looking at the way that they are communicating to create uncertainty in the market so that they can use specific sentences to have a quick and immediate response into asset prices. They know how to do it. We break it down. We show you right here through all the documents, and they can't hide it from us. Like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. They can't take it away from me now, because we got it. We know. And we're recognizing it every time we turn on the mainstream media and watching the propaganda just confuse the hell out of everybody out there. We recognize it for what it is. All right, Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.